My name is Warren. I'm 65 years old, and until last week, I ran logistics for Grayson and Doyle Engineering out of Seattle. 42 years in operations. 28 with this company. When they called me into the conference room and said my early retirement was effective immediately, I didn't flinch. The room was quiet. Greg, the CFO, all of 29 years old, cleared his throat like he was doing me a favor. You've done great work here, Warren. We just think it's time for some fresh thinking. I nodded, looked around at the faces I'd mentored. Interns I'd helped land full-time jobs. Engineers who used to call me Uncle Warren. They stared at the floor. Greg smiled like the matter was settled. No hard feelings, right? Of course not, I said. But I already knew he was making a mistake. A big one. And by the time he realized it, I'd be halfway to fixing it, without him. I packed up my office in under 15 minutes. I'd always traveled light, kept my awards in a drawer, photos of my wife and granddaughter on a single corkboard. The only thing I took with care was the worn leather notebook I'd carried since 1989. Inside, handwritten specs, fail-safe routes, supplier contacts no one else had bothered to build relationships with. The moment I got home, my wife Lorraine had the kettle on. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. They think you're too old, she said quietly. They'll think something else soon enough, I replied. I didn't plan to get involved again. Not really. I told myself I'd enjoy retirement. Take my granddaughter to her dance recitals. Learn to cook something besides chili. But then Vic called again. Warren, they're bidding out the Eddystone flood barrier project. You know, the one we scoped out before you left. I remembered. A $24 million job. Multi-phase. Complex terrain. High-risk soil. We'd spent a year prepping the proposal. I'd personally walked the entire shoreline during the rainy season, made notes on every erosion pattern and sediment drift. I knew that project better than I knew my own backyard. Greg shelved all your specs, Vic said. They're going with a design from some outfit in Portland, EdgeCore Dynamics. Kids in their 30s. Whole thing's AI generated. I leaned back in my kitchen chair. EdgeCore. Yeah. Real flashy. Lots of buzzwords. Zero real-world experience. But they promised to do it for half our price. Greg jumped. Of course he did. Did they even look at the seasonal water displacement numbers? No, Vic said. They don't even know what that means. That night, I pulled out my old notebooks. There were 6 volumes. Handwritten schematics. Margin notes from conversations with field techs. A complete materials map that included vendors, shipping delays, and floodplain reactivity based on barometric anomalies. I sat there for hours, thumbing through them like old photo albums. Lorraine walked in around midnight, saw me at the table with a pen in my hand. You thinking of going back? Not exactly. Then what are you doing? I closed the notebook. Something I should have done years ago. The next morning, I called 3 people. Alicia, a retired surveyor who knew terrain like the back of her hand. Dale, the best hydrologist I ever worked with. And Nora, a procurement expert who got forced out during the last budget cuts because she refused to automate her job. They all said the same thing. Where and when? By the end of the week, we had a name, Northfield Strategies. An LLC formed in 2 days and registered out of a shared office space near Lake Union. No logo. No PR team. Just 4 so-called relics and a laptop that took 10 minutes to boot up. We got the bid package from the city the following Monday. I read through the specs twice, then a 3rd time. That's when I realized EdgeCore had missed something critical. The foundation depths were calibrated for drought season, not peak flow. If they built their design as is, the whole barrier would sink 2 inches a year. In 5 years, it'd be useless. They weren't just wrong, they were dangerous. I spent the next 10 days working out of the local library. Lorraine brought sandwiches. Dale ran simulations on borrowed equipment. Alicia rewalked the site on her own time and hand-drew topographical overlays the city engineers didn't even have. We didn't sleep much. We didn't need to. We'd done this before. We were building something that would last. When we submitted the proposal, I didn't expect much. We weren't the low bid. We weren't flashy. But we were right. A week later, Vic texted me. Cities asking questions. They caught the depth miscalculation in EdgeCore's proposal. Guess who flagged it? 3 days after that, I got a call from the mayor's office. We'd like to speak with Mr. Warren Cole. Is he available for a presentation next Tuesday? I smiled. He's retired. But he might make an exception. The conference room was bigger than I remembered. High ceilings, cheap coffee, and that faint industrial carpet smell that never quite leaves your clothes. I hadn't been in a municipal pitch in 6 years, but the air was the same. Tense, polite, and full of people pretending they already knew the outcome. Greg was there, sitting at the far end of the room with EdgeCore's team. All slim blazers and sharp haircuts. One of them was wearing sneakers with a suit. They barely looked old enough to rent a car. The city engineer, a tall woman named Janine Cortez, motioned for me to begin. I didn't use slides. I didn't bring handouts. I brought the blue notebook. The one with water stains on the back cover and coffee rings on the first page. I opened it and started talking. Not in buzzwords. Not in jargon. I talked about frost heave patterns during La Nina years. About the way silt from the Columbia backs up into the estuary after a hard thaw. About the mistakes we made in '97 and the things we swore we'd never do again. I watched them lean forward. When I finished, Janine looked up and said, "Can you walk us through your adjustment model again? The one for base layer anchoring." Greg laughed. "That's not necessary. They're using legacy data from before the satellite overlay updates." I turned toward him. "You mean the overlays that don't account for post-fire soil degradation on the western ridge? You should have checked page 12. He didn't say anything. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Janine nodded. "I want a site visit scheduled. Both proposals. Same day. Same hour." I could feel EdgeCore bristle. The guy in the sneakers muttered something about overkill. One of them tried to whisper that we were bluffing with nostalgia. I didn't bother replying. That night, Nora called me. "They're nervous." "Good," I said. "They started following me on LinkedIn." "They're very nervous." The site visit was Thursday. It rained. Hard. The kind of steady Pacific Northwest rain that turns everything to memory foam and lies to your boots about how deep the water really is. EdgeCore showed up in windbreakers. I showed up in the jacket I've used for 40 years and a laminated topo map sealed inside 2 Ziploc bags. I led Janine and her team down to the southern slope, where a forgotten culvert crossed under the main access road. "This is your problem," I said, pointing to the runoff path. "Every spring this fills, oversaturates the clay, and undermines anything you build within 15 yards. EdgeCore's lead guy looked confused. I turned to Janine. "Their model doesn't even mention it." She didn't say much. Just nodded and took notes. When we finished the walkthrough, she pulled me aside. "Off the record, Warren. How did you know about the culvert?" "I didn't," I said. "I remembered it." She smiled. "Not the polite kind. The real kind. The kind that tells you the rest of the room just shifted and only a few people noticed." The next day, the city council voted. Unanimous. Northfield Strategies awarded the contract. Greg didn't even call to congratulate me. But Vic did. "You just beat a venture-backed firm with 4 people and a flip phone." "I'd like to thank Google Maps and knee pain," I said. We laughed. Then we didn't. Because it wasn't funny, not really. They hadn't just underestimated us. They'd erased us. Acted like experience was something that expired with your hairline. Like memory had no value unless it came with an app. But memory built bridges. It held rivers back. It saved cities when math forgot to check the weather. We weren't back. We never left. They just stopped looking. The Monday after the vote, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Warren, it's Malcolm. You probably don't remember me. I remember. You were the intern who fell asleep during the Culver Ridge inspection in 2015. There was a pause, then a nervous laugh. Yeah. Guilty. Malcolm now worked for Penway Civil, one of the largest infrastructure firms in the region. He'd seen the city's decision come through the contractor's wire and had called before the ink was even dry. They said your firm won Eddystone by exposing a critical flaw in EdgeCore's floodplain modeling. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Look, I'll get to the point. We have 2 coastal fortification projects in planning. Real budgets. We're interested in a third-party evaluation. Independent review. Would Northfield be open to consulting? I glanced at the kitchen clock. 6:48 a.m. Lorraine slid a plate of eggs in front of me like it was any other day. How independent are we talking? I asked. Name your rate. That afternoon, I drove over to Nora's place. She worked out of her garage, whiteboards along the walls, spreadsheets pinned to cork, and 3 legal pads open at once. 2 more contracts, she asked when I told her. 2 more invitations to fail gracefully. We'll be offering an alternative. She nodded. We'll need capacity. Alicia and Dale were already in. So I called Peter, retired field lead from Mississippi, relocated to Oregon, bored out of his mind, and Roz, a brilliant drafter forced into early retirement when her firm downsized and outsourced everything to AI. Everyone said yes without hesitation. We didn't call ourselves a comeback. We called ourselves a correction. Meanwhile, word spread. The industry forums lit up with questions. Who the hell is Northfield Strategies? Did they really outbid EdgeCore without underbidding? Are they consultants or just stubborn old-timers with clipboards? I let the rumors swirl. Greg, on the other hand, tried to control the narrative. According to Vic, he called an emergency all-hands at Grayson and Doyle that Friday. Spoke for 25 minutes about modernization initiatives and next-gen modeling workflows. Never once mentioned why the city council had blacklisted their flood proposal from future municipal bids. Vic sent me a picture of the whiteboard. Buzzwords everywhere. Not one mention of the soil. The real irony came a week later when EdgeCore themselves reached out. They wanted to partner, their word, not mine, on a joint proposal for an upcoming dam restoration bid in northern Washington. Your field insights would be invaluable, their email said. I replied, so would yours. When you get some. I never heard back. We didn't celebrate with champagne. We celebrated with working printers and decent coffee and the sound of people who hadn't been asked for their opinion in a decade getting calls from city engineers saying, actually, we'd like your take on this. We didn't win because we were old. We won because we'd seen things fall apart and remembered how to put them back together. This wasn't nostalgia. It was relevance rediscovered. 3 weeks after we started work on Eddystone, the city called us in for a progress review. Not a formality, a full walkthrough, detailed Q&A with the oversight committee. Engineers. Auditors. A guy from the mayor's office who didn't bother hiding his skepticism. They gave EdgeCore the same chance. We went second. I let Dale run the technical review. He'd always been better at breaking down hydrodynamics for non-specialists. Alicia presented the site data overlay, hand-annotated on paper, because she still didn't trust tablets in the rain. I wrapped it up with our contingency matrix, the stuff that never makes it into the pitch decks. Material shortages. Delayed barge routes. The way a late spring melt could push the flood curve up by 12 days. When we finished, the committee just sat there. Then Janine Cortez said, "This is the most field-grounded proposal I've seen in 10 years." The guy from the mayor's office scribbled something in his notebook. Didn't look up. Afterward, he pulled me aside in the hallway. "I'll be honest," he said. "When we saw your age on the roster, we had concerns. Now, well, I'd like to talk about a project we've been sitting on for months." "Let's hear it." "Upstate. Dam retrofit. Has to comply with outdated federal codes and modern climate thresholds. No one wants to touch it." I smiled. We like jobs no one wants to touch. He nodded slowly. We thought you were done, Mr. Cole. I was. And that was the moment it shifted. Not with a contract or a press release. Just one sentence from someone who finally understood what we were doing. That night, I got a message from an old contact at the DOT. Heard about Eddystone. You still got a team. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked out to the garage where my granddaughter's old bike still leaned against the wall. She'd outgrown it last year, but I hadn't had the heart to sell it. Lorraine found me 20 minutes later, flipping through my old hard hat stickers like they were souvenirs. You're thinking about expanding. I'm thinking about responsibility. She leaned against the doorway. You thought retirement would mean no more responsibility. Turns out, it just changed shape. I looked down at the sticker in my hand, a faded one from the Fairchild River job in '92. We were good back then, I said. You're better now. The next morning, I drafted a message to Bethany Meyer, the city's chief structural analyst. She'd once told me she wanted to leave public service, do something with more autonomy. She had a reputation for brutal honesty and never used the phrase best practices unless she meant it. I offered her a job. 2 hours later, she said yes. Our little team was starting to look like something more. Not a rebellion. Not a nostalgia act. Something resilient. Something focused. And people were noticing. The irony. The more we grew, the less I wanted to talk about what had happened at Grayson and Doyle. Not because I forgave them. Because I didn't need them anymore. Relevance doesn't need an apology. It just keeps showing up. It came on a Wednesday afternoon. I was walking back from the field, boots muddy, sunburn on my neck, phone nearly dead from tracking GPS elevations. When it rang, I didn't recognize the number. Area code was local, but unfamiliar. I answered anyway. Warren, the voice said, cautious. It's Greg. For a second I thought maybe it was a prank. Then I heard it, that tight, practiced tone people use when they're trying not to sound desperate. I wanted to talk. Just 10 minutes, if you have it. I looked out over the site. The cofferdam crews were ahead of schedule. Alicia was laughing with a junior tech over something the wind had knocked over. Nora was sitting on the tailgate of her truck, typing away with 2 phones open. I had time. Go ahead, I said. There was a long pause. Then he started explaining how things had spiraled after Eddystone, how EdgeCore had quietly backed out of another bid, how 2 key clients had frozen their contracts with Grayson and Doyle pending further evaluation. I didn't realize how much knowledge we were relying on, he said. How much wasn't written down. It was, I said. You just didn't know where to look. Another pause. Warren, would you consider consulting for us? Just part-time. Help us re-establish some continuity. I didn't laugh. I didn't yell. I just let it sit there, quiet and heavy. No, I said. But I appreciate the call. I understand. It was worth asking. It was. He hung up. I stood there for a while, phone in my pocket, wind in my ears. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. What I felt was something quieter. Final. Some bridges don't need to be burned. They just fall out of use. That night, Lorraine and I went to dinner. Nothing fancy. Diner on 9th and Ellison. Same waitress we've had since before smartphones. She brought us pie without asking. You seem lighter, Lorraine said. I am. Greg. I nodded. What did he want? Help. She raised an eyebrow. Did you? No. She took a bite of cherry pie. Good. He wasn't calling for the right reasons. I know. The next day, Bethany presented her first structural audit report for the new coastal dam project. Dale sat in. Roz ran the render visualizations. The room was full, not with suits, but with problem solvers, people who remembered that infrastructure isn't just steel and stone. It's responsibility. It's trust. Later, as I walked out of the meeting, One of the city engineers caught up with me. "I've been meaning to ask," he said, "what does Northfield stand for?" I looked up at the ridge behind him, where the trees thinned out and the wind carried the sound of progress with it. "Nothing really," I said. "Just a name. But it's starting to mean something." He smiled. I did too. Because sometimes the best legacy isn't a monument, or a plaque, or a title someone else gives you. Sometimes it's a quiet company with good people, solving hard problems, and proving that experience doesn't expire. It just evolves.